Recording has started. So, hi everyone, welcome to the Dev Hangout version May. And today I bring to you the very talented Amit Saharana from 100ms, who will be talking about feature flag based traffic routing. How did we come about to this topic? Is that we were just discussing a few different ideas on Unleash, right? And Amit here raised his hand, talking about how the implementation at 100ms worked, and that's how we got to talking. That would you like to share more about this topic and how you implement it? Because we always we always want to understand more about what our community members are doing with Unleash, and of course this could be you as well in the future. So if you have a great idea, or if you're using Unleash in a different way, or if you just want to talk about Unleash and or maybe your architecture, I would love to host another Dev Hangout talking more about your implementations, right? And yes, I guess we can let Amit take over, right?
Sure. Just to call out, so Sarvesh is our CTO and yeah, at Anonymous, and he's also here. Sarvesh.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Sarvesh. Hi, Dinesh. Welcome to the Dev Hangout.
Okay. So let me start with the presentation. Yeah. So I will be basically talking about the feature flags based traffic routing. So I will straight dive into what how we do that and what are the main components at our at 100ms. So about me, I've already talked about me a bit. So basically, I'm currently working as a software engineer in the infra team, and previously I've worked in Facebook, Menlo Park, Adobe HackerRank, and yeah, and I own like various repositories like Keda, Scalar, templates, init, Room APIs, chat recording, real-time DB, and I'm a contributor to other backend repositories at AWS. So let me go straight to the what is so 100ms, as you already know about, is a platform that provides a different kind of audio video technologies like SDKs, REST APIs, and other things, so that we can add a good quality streaming and video quality platform. And yeah, to know more about, you might have already have the link to start with the 100ms architecture. So this is the main architecture diagram of 100ms. So because it's a complex audio video infrastructure, we it's not simply like a simple set of APIs, but different kind of components. Like the base is the main WebSocket of application. Then there are different kind of for forwarding and load balancing the different requests among the servers main init application. So init stands for initializer, and basically it routes the traffic to different clusters based upon some logic, and that's the logic that we will be talking about today. So you can go through this architecture diagram in the presentation that I've linked. I can paste the presentation link, or Pranshul, you can share that also. So what is init basically? So basically, the different SDKs that 100ms has, and different web applications, Android applications, etc., all start with a call to the init. So basically, init fetches the WebSocket or the cluster to join. And this is the architecture diagram for a single clusters. And to cater to different users based in US, Europe, India, and other places, we have different Kubernetes clusters in those regions. Like one is situated in US, one is in EU, and we have at least 2 or 3 clusters in India, depending upon the traffic. So we all these clusters are basically identified by this biz, which is the WebSocket application, and it provides a WebSocket URL to connect to. And the init is basically provides the correct WebSocket URL to which our user or room would be presented. Then it provides the turn server configurations, the network configuration, and which flags like features are enabled. That's the responsibility of this init, that you are seeing in this architecture diagram. So how do we do that? So basically, inits provide this uh, configuration to the user, whoever wants to join. So we had this problem that init needs all this feature flags and all the clusters and WebSocket information. So we tried out various feature flag solutions. So to give an overview, I listed them down in this. So we have this different candidates for feature flags like Unleash, Launch, Darkly, Firebase, and we compared them on various features like dashboard, pricing, whether they are fast, whether they provide Golang SDKs because we are using Golang in our backends, whether they provide client-side SDKs, whether they have a limits on the usage, whether they provide percentage reload, and in all the cases, Unleash provides either equal or better facilities in most of them. So we chose Unleash as our feature flag solution instead of the feature flag solutions like Launch. So you might not Unleash.
Sorry, Amit, sorry to interrupt you. Maybe you should try to disable your video because you are breaking up a bit on the voice there. So maybe in terms of saving bandwidth, maybe that can help.
Yeah. Is it fine now?
It's better now, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So we have different candidates for feature flags like Unleash, Launch, Darkly, and Firebase, and we settled on Unleash based upon our requirements. Yeah. So Unleash architecture you might already know about, so I'm skipping that part. But to go over like basically we had these different requirements. So to now go over to the traffic based like feature flags based traffic routing that we want to discuss. That is the main topic of this talk. So we had these requirements that we want to roll out to a percentage of users, and we want to roll out to specific customers, room templates, emails, region, and cluster. And we want to roll out to specific SDK versions of Android ISO. These rollouts are basically the feature flags, the flags that are there. But to do the routing itself, basically we have this architecture diagram for the traffic routing. So all the requests come to prod init.100ms.live, which is the main URL for the init application. And then there is a AWS geolocation based, which can route the request to different inits based in different clusters. But basically, mainly it's going to IN2 cluster only currently. And then it requests all the information about which cluster it wants to route the traffic to based on some parameters which I will discuss using Unleash. And then it gives the correct WebSocket URL to which application, which cluster we can connect to. Either it can be the US cluster, EU cluster, or the India cluster. Yeah. So how basically the request is routed to different clusters. So what we have is basically we have this different feature flags which are named cluster override dash cluster name, and these feature flags are basically, so we have to show you a diagram of like which feature flags we have. So we have all these cluster override feature flags in our application, which are basically named cluster override slash cluster name. And these cluster override feature flags identify which cluster the request should go to. And how do we do that? We basically iterate over the clusters one by one in alphabetical order. And then we check whether this feature flag is enabled or not. So if that feature flag is enabled based on customer ID, room ID, email ID, etc., then we route the request to that feature flag. So to correlated with the architecture diagram, from the Unleash, we will check this so we have the cluster India cluster 1, India cluster 2, US cluster, EU cluster. We will check which of these the given customer ID, room ID, email ID should route to. We basically fetch that information from the bearer token, and then using that information, whichever cluster gets selected first out of this cluster override cluster, we send our request to that cluster. So it's as simple as that. So yeah, so how do we distribute the traffic between the different clusters? So we use different Unleash strategies for distributing the traffic between different clusters. So we have multiple clusters per region, and we use the room ID, customer ID suffixes conditions. So suppose because we are using IDs, MongoDB IDs basically, to identify the customer or the room information. So we have like 16 suffixes for a given ID. It's basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and A, B, C, D, E. And using the unleash strategy, that this room ID should end in either A, B, C, D, E, that should go to this cluster. Or if this email ID ends with 100ml.live, or let's say unleash.go or something like that, then it can go to that cluster. So we use this emails ending with conditions, and also the customer ID suffix condition that it should end with A or it should end with B, then it's going to US cluster or India cluster, because we have different clusters per region. We have 3 clusters, India clusters. So we can distribute the traffic among the different clusters by using this suffix conditions. And then we have a concept of templates. So basically each different customers use different templates to identify the rooms that they're joining in. And then we have data about how much usage of a given customer has on different templates. Then we can put this template condition directly into the Unleash UI to identify how much traffic we want to do. So this basically helps us distribute fine-grained percentage of traffic to different clusters. Like if we want to, let's say, divert 20% traffic, then we define 3 suffixes for customer IDs ending with A, B, and C to divert to IN1 cluster. So this provides a like a very fine-grained control over how much traffic we want to distribute to a given cluster. And we then have other features in it, basically backup modes and other, which are not the concepts of this. But one important concept that is still the in the scope of this talk is the runtime configurator. So in the Unleash, we have this all this concept, and suppose we want to add a new cluster to this to our architecture, an IN3 cluster. So how do we do that? Without like making a configuration change, without making a static configuration change, and without redeploying the application. So we are storing all the information about all the clusters in our runtime configurator. This is mainly because we could not find a simple way to query all the flags that are in a given application, a given project. So basically, we have custom projects in Unleash, but we could not identify like how to query the list of flags in a given project. So we have stored this information in a runtime configuration. We use GCP runtime configurator, and we store the list of clusters into that. So once we have the list of clusters, we just need to update the list of clusters in the runtime configurator and add that to Unleash as a new cluster override flag. So using this cluster override flag, we can have we can have a new cluster configured without like deploying the application, without making any deployment. So that's about how the runtime configurator work. And to disable, like there are other features also which I wanted to talk. So one is like if we want to disable or enable clusters, we can just disable that feature flag from Unleash, and that cluster gets disabled. And then there is another feature using disabling accounts. So how do we disable the accounts at 100 ms? So that part is also controlled by this cluster override only. So we have special flags called cluster override account disabled. And whenever we want to disable any account, we can just add the customer ID, room ID to this cluster override account disabled. So what happens is that we have configured these clusters to give the dummy URL, like not found URLs for WebSocket and clusters. And so any clusters, rooms, templates, email IDs that goes to account disabled, basically that matches with this cluster. So these are the first clusters because they start with the name A. And whenever if the accounts or clusters match those, then those all the traffic goes to like those customers or email IDs match with those, and they don't get a valid URL. So that's how like we disabling even the disabling accounts can work. Yeah, and we collect different kind of metrics, etc. In Unleash, we check that on the metrics dashboard, and we also have different kind of metrics on in it, which basically helps us identify which cluster is being used, how much, and all those things. So that's mostly about the like how the cluster this how traffic based routing works. I went it in fast pace speed, but I hope that that was like helpful and clarifies things. But I'm open to any Q&As and how the things work.
Yeah, a quick question for me. The init function, is that a Lambda or how is that implemented?
Which function?
The init function or the init method or
How does that?
yeah, how is it implemented?
It's basically implemented. So it has all the data in this runtime configured, the configuration, which clusters are there. The clusters override flags are in unleash, and it queries whether there is a running session or not through the BIS, and through the ISLB. And these ISLBs across different clusters like EU, US, etc., have a remote sync using Kafka and other things.
Okay, cool. Is it a Lambda or how is it kind of routing the traffic?
Okay. It's a normal Golang microservice, and it's deployed on Kubernetes, and
Okay.
it's a normal API service.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Nice. I have a question actually about room IDs. Can you share a bit more about what a room ID is in context of 100 ms?
Okay. So to give an example, like suppose we are joining any room at 100 ms, any link. So this link, when we join this audio video call, then this
Right.
is a room ID associated with this link. So there's a room ID, session ID associated. So each link has a room ID. And so when we are joining the room, then we can configure like traffic, percentage based traffic by doing a percent, doing different suffixes of these 16 identifiers, 0 to 9, A to F. So there's a room in the database.
Interesting. And this yeah. Is this based on whoever hosts the room or wherever they're joining from?
Yeah, whoever like hosts the room. So based on the first pair ID, we allocate a room ID to it. Room ID is constant whenever a room is created.
Interesting. Nice. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or raise your hand and ask if you would prefer that. There's also chat if you can't talk. I know that Stacy was in a train, so yeah. But yeah, ask away. I will go ahead with another question because I have a few. Amit, can you tell me about a few common mistakes that your team made when implementing feature flags for this? Anything that we can avoid if we want to implement it?
Yeah. So one mistake that I was doing while initially thinking of how to implement this cluster override thing is basically I was thinking in terms of only one feature flag. So I was thinking there might be some kind of configuration, one feature thing that I just query and it will return me the result somehow. So I was trying different kind of variants. Even I was thinking of switching from Unleash to let's say a complex feature flag solution, like I would say launch directly or Firebase, in which I could store one configuration and then just query it and it somehow return the results. But that's not like it would be very complex for that configuration to be stored at the backend and to work with it. Instead, I simplified it that I defined just a Boolean for each cluster. I defined one Boolean for each cluster override dash cluster name, and whatever conditions using the criterias of room IDs, customer IDs, email IDs matched to this cluster, I route to that cluster. So it got very simple when I thought it of in terms of one feature flag uh, per cluster, and it's just a Boolean instead of thinking of a complex architecture, storing the data and just one feature flag. So instead of one feature flags, I distributed it to n feature flags for n clusters, and it worked very easy.
Nice. So it's simple enough when you're attaching booleans to
Yeah.
make it, yeah. Nice. We have a question from Stacy. If you were to take down the US cluster, just an example, you would have to update the strategies first, so those users wouldn't experience any pauses in service, correct?
So basically, we performed a backup mode. Basically, we implemented a feature called as backup mode in our init service itself. And basically, what we did was we implemented all this logic where we defined the cluster information that we are storing in runtime configuration as a cluster slash backup URLs, all these things. And whenever we want to do a draining or do a put down the US cluster or EU cluster, in fact, we have done it quite a few times in the past. We just define its backup URL to be another cluster that is already up, like India cluster, or for India cluster, we define it to be US cluster. And we just, that just returns the URL of that region. And this, through this, because we have like a stateful application instead of a stateless application in the WebSockets. So we just need to wait for the traffic to drain out, and then we can do any maintenance activity, and then we start up those clusters again. So we have this concept of backup mode, and we have implemented it quite nicely, and we have used it quite a few times.
Nice.
In your presentation, Amit, and thank you for also raising your challenges using Unleash. I did think you mentioned that you didn't find an API to query list of feature toggles in a project.
It was not presented.
I think maybe we should have a conversation on that. Obviously, you have an API in Unleash under the projects where you can list all the feature tags belonging to a certain project.
Okay.
So this should be possible. You can also query based on tags or other mechanisms. So we should just point to that and make sure that you have at least the API needs to do your work, I guess.
That would quite be helpful. So like when I was starting it out with, I think 5 or 6 months ago, then it might not be present or something like that. But I would like to take a look at it, and I would be curious.
Yeah,
and definitely.
absolutely. And also to be clear on that, there is obviously 2 parts. You have the admin API where you mutate the status of a toggle, and you can operate on a project-specific level. That's how you need to do it starting from version 5. You will always need to access feature toggle from the project they belong to. But from the SDK point of view, you can also use a scoped API token so that you can scope an API token for the SDK to only be allowed to access a certain project or a list of projects, so that they will only see those toggles belonging to those projects.
Yeah, that would be cool to explore. Thanks.
Nice. Amit, can you tell me a bit more about what metrics are you tracking with these feature toggles? You mentioned analytics that you're tracking. I'm not sure what you're exactly tracking, but yeah, what are you tracking with feature flags?
So feature flags, like mostly it depends upon the use case. So for traffic-based routers, we have all these Grafana metrics. Like we have custom metrics exposed from our init application, and then we have made this Grafana chart of how many times which cluster is getting called, like account disabled, or which cluster the traffic is going to. And then we have the response codes and all these things we are tracking. So these are like the basic metrics. And for other feature flags like subscribe degradation, etc., we have different kind of metrics, custom metrics exposed for it.
Nice. Nice. That's quite interesting. And what about the technical debt? How do you manage that? What kind of measures do you have? Because I saw that there's a ton of feature flags in there. So yeah, how do you manage that technical debt?
Technical debt, as in like when we like implement a new major feature like subscribe degradation or something like that. So we usually like roll out to a few users, then get the feedback about what kind of like technical challenges they are facing, or if there are any bugs they are facing. And depending upon that, we continue the traffic-based rollout, because as I already talked in detail about how we can have a split percentage base, so we can increase the percentage in that manner. And once we have reached 100%, then we can take a relook at either
Amit, you're breaking up. Sorry, I think there's an internet issue.
Am I audible now? I think it's
Yes, yes.
yeah. So whenever like we have to go back and relook at whether a feature flag related code can be removed or cleaned up, then we take a relook at it. But we have not done it like we do it only when needed. So if the feature flag has been rolled out to 100% of the users after doing this split traffic kind of thing that I explained in detail, then we can remove it from the init application code.
Right. And has there been? Oh, okay. Stacy has a question. I'm interested in how you've set this project up. What kind of users, if any, would you trust with your feature flags? Just thinking about a project I'm up to my neck in which some of my users want access to feature flags.
Yeah. So, like we have partitioned the projects per different applications. So init is one of the applications. So we have a project called init, and then depending upon the different kind of services, as I showed you in the architecture diagram. So SFU is one of them. So any feature flags being used by SFU, they are being in a separate SFU project. Then there's a Beam project. So we have partitioned the projects per applications, and then the feature flags are then listed down that project. So that's how like we have like segregated the feature flags per applications. And yeah, regarding the users. So users, like we have, so the different application owners. So we have one application owner for the different applications. So the different projects we have interested with the application owners, and we have one POC from the QA team that has the access to the and like to the senior guy who can edit the feature flag and make it make any changes to the clusters.
That's interesting. So, Amit, have you ever had any conflicts with different feature flags that they've interfered over each other, or even during traffic that one flag sent traffic that way, one sent that way, and it messed it up?
Not really. So, like in the init logic itself, like we have this cluster override logic that I was explaining. So, in this logic, we can have overlapping conditions between the different flags. So, if and we override it by the alphabetical order that I described. So, if the first flag, whichever first flag that the feature flag counts to, we send the traffic to that. So this is basically by thinking in terms of the booleans and thinking in terms that overlapping. So the same room ID could be
You're breaking up again, Amit.
yeah. So basically, we match the first cluster or region that the init sends to, and we send it to that, even if they are overlapping conditions. So we break the ties in the application.
Interesting. I think Google Meet could use some feature flags for traffic routing too.
Okay, could you repeat again, please?
No, I said that maybe Google Meet could use feature flags for traffic routing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, I think anybody else has some questions? I feel that I've been asking a lot of questions. Oh, thank you so much, Sarvesh, for attending. Yeah.
I'm just curious, Amit, how many clusters do you operate around the world?
So we have one cluster in the U region, one cluster in the US region, and we had like at least 4 or 5 clusters in the India region. They were like some are experimental. We were testing on OCI, so it's very easy using this init application to spawn new clusters. Just add the WebSocket URL in the runtime configuration, and we are done with spawning a new cluster. So we had OCI clusters, GCP clusters, AWS clusters. So we have 4 or 5 in the India region.
Yeah. So are you using some kind of Terraform or something to spin up a new cluster, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, we have some form of IAC in the that the DevOps team is using to spin up new clusters and different cloud providers in different regions, and all the applications that we need to deploy it, that is maintained, and we just um, a new cluster comes up using the IAC code with the latest services that are deployed in the India region, which is the main region, main cluster, and then yeah, that's how we are doing that.
That's super interesting. So you also multi-cloud, not just AWS. Is that correct?
We are using.
Are you also multi-cloud?
Yeah, multi-cloud we are. We were testing with OCI also. So we test. So basically in the networking layer related to this, because audio video required higher networking. So we face some issues there,
Yeah.
and we moving away from OCI currently. And GCP is the main one that is like very coherent in providing good networking in terms for audio video, SFU, and the main components needed for audio relay, video relay.
Yeah. Cool. So just curious. So we just released something called Unleash Edge, and I was curious if you have looked into if it makes sense for you guys to also kind of use an Unleash Edge instance in each region that you spin up, so that you can have more kind of resiliency in terms of making sure that you always can access Unleash.
Okay, we will look at it. So in terms of availability, I would say Unleash is like quite available. We have an alert setup whenever Unleash goes down, and we have received it only 2 times. I would say one was only a 3-minute downtime, and another was even lesser than that, 1 minute only. So in terms of SLA, like Unleash has provided more than 99.99% that I would like to call out. Yeah, definitely. With the robustness that Unleash has provided, we have faced little issues with it.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that, and obviously we do what uppermost to be resilient. At the same time, networks are unreliable, and there will always be cases where even it could be misconfiguration on in the networks between our two services. So that's also why we built the Unleash Edge, so that you can have something running in your data center or in your cloud provider that is closer to your app, so that you also take away that risk, right? So that if you, for some reason, cannot access Unleash, it might not be that Unleash is actually down. It could just be some network disturbances. So we see at least customers like yourself having these global kind of multi-region setup. This is the use case for Edge, basically, to make it even more robust, basically.
Oh, sure. I will check it out. I've noted it down.
Cool. And this goes for everyone. We are very appreciative of any feedback on Edge. It's still early days, and obviously it will replace the proxy eventually, but it's still something that it's production ready, but obviously we still want feedback on how to evolve the Edge. So I also have a question for you, because you're using a lot of feature flags to test our functionality. Is it how do you usually start by rolling out a new functionality? Who are you testing on first in production?
Yeah, starting the rolling out the functionality. So we already talked about. So suppose there's a new feature that is subscriber degradation is the one of them that we recently rolled out. So we implemented this, like we just added this feature flag, one in Unleash and one in runtime config. And like even this configuration is dynamic, and we can do it without deploying anything. We just update the runtime configuration and the feature flag, and we are done. And once that it, we put a different kind of room. So we first rolled out into internal 100ms customers by putting the email ID feature, that is email IDs ending with 100ms.live. They get served this feature. And how it does that is that init provides feature flag flag to SDKs, and SDKs show that to web apps, and web apps basically decide if they want to show this feature or not. And yeah, we first rolled it out to internal 100 ms users, then to a few customer IDs, then a few room IDs. And based upon traffic split, we went from 6% to 10% to 15%. And based upon feedback and issues, we went back to 10%. And then once we were confident, we rolled it out to 100% of the users.
What type of feedback do you usually use to decide whether to reduce or increase the exposure?
So because we have targeted metrics, we have targeted the which customer IDs, which room IDs we are using these flags directly on Unleash. So we just get the feedback from those customers. So the if a given customer ID is enabled, we usually have the feedback from that customer, or if a room ID is available, we have the feedback from that calls using either logs, metrics, tracing, and whatever observability tools we have, and from direct customer feedback also.
Oh.
Yep. Yes, JC, that's built with Rust.
Yeah, Rest is awesome.
I think that's the only global consensus in in development, that Rust is awesome. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to do with it actually. That's why we are pushing it hard, and inviting more feedback around an Unleash Edge. Yeah. Nice. So, any questions, Helen, Stacy, Dinesh, Ivar? Any other questions? I can. It still has a cult following, Stacy. Everybody who uses Rust every day does not want to work with anything else. Nice. Nice. Awesome. Right. So I really just have one small question. Amit, how do you name your flags if you have so many flags? Right. What kind of naming convention do you use to internally to name your flags?
Yeah. For this traffic routing based, we had to like name it in a very specific way, because we had to identify which flags are there whenever someone goes. So init application uses many flags, and so we named all the traffic routing flags starting with cluster override. So and then with the cluster names, and even the cluster names we named it very specifically, like the cloud provider GCP, AWS, the first part, then the region that it is located in, Mumbai or US or EU or India, and then the availability zone, AZ zone, and then a suffix 1 2 3 4 5 6. So using this convention, we named the traffic based flags: cluster override dash cluster name, GCP ID, cloud provider, region, AZ zone, and then a suffix. And for other feature flags, we usually name it by the feature flag, and depending upon the project, we don't need to append the application name. Otherwise, we append the service name also in the feature flag.
Interesting. I've heard some complex naming conventions within the community, but again, those depend on teams and how they want to function, right?
Yeah.
Anywho, are there any other questions for Amit or for Ivar as well? Actually,
So is there anything you would like us to improve in Unleash?
Yeah, like I had a couple of questions. So definitely, since you already point out it, the API thing, so that one I will look at it to query the different flags that are in a given project, so that it will ease my life. So I think I will still need to store some information in the runtime config, but not query it for the different flags that it have. So one is that. Another thing, I think APIs currently we are not using that much. Like we have to manually edit it using the UI. That's because I think the API adoption, I would say, APIs, I would say we found a bit cumbersome to work it with. So we will check the APIs a bit more later on. I think there's a review or due of how we are using the feature flags internally in our teams, because the last time this Unleash thing we used at least 6 months ago, and we were quite content with all the features and everything. But the UI, editing it from the UI is definitely prone to errors, and we want to do it more in terms of either some kind of GitOps based config that gets synced with the change. So we will be using the Unleash APIs to do that. And once we start using it, I will let you know like how we are using it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, UIs are quite convenient but prone to errors.
Absolutely, and we try to make the UI as simple as possible. But then again, particularly when you have repetitive things or things you can automate, our take on that is that you should automate that. Any feedback on how we can obviously make your APIs better is always appreciated. We try to do our best, so everything is now automatically documented with OpenAPI and such. But then again, we can always find room to improve stuff, and to do that we rely on actual feedback from users. So yeah, anyone else have any other questions? It could also be related to Unleash or the roadmap or whatever.
Any feature requests too?
I think no, but feel free to shoot a message on Slack as well. We try our best to answer all questions on Slack, and we try to be transparent on everything we do and involve all our users. It's super important to me personally, but also to the entire team, that we build something that is actually useful and solves real problems.
There's no separate Slack link for Dev Hangout, Helen. I'm not sure if you're part of the Slack, but here's how you can join Slack. I can share the link with you.
It should be slack.unleash.run. That is the short URL for that.
You can just join our Slack, and any feedback about Unleash, any questions about Unleash, just ask away. Shoot us a message or ask on the general channel. Somebody from our community could answer, or we can do. Yeah. But if you don't have any feature requests right now, or if you don't have any issues running Unleash right now, you can still meet us next week for our office hours. Right. This is the first time we're hosting office hours, and any issue with your setup, any questions regarding any features, we meet on May 17th, and it's a short session. Even if you cannot attend, if the time is inconvenient for you, I'll start a thread after this conversation on our Slack, so that you can ask questions. Or if you're on our GitHub, go to GitHub discussions, and that's also where you can ask questions. We'll be collecting all the questions and answering them on the call with practical implementation, so that it's helpful for you to follow. Right. If you're not if you're not a part of our community, make sure you join our Slack. It's shared in our chat. But if you haven't started us on GitHub, you should go ahead and do that right now. I highly recommend it. 100 points to, or if you start us on GitHub. Yeah. Link is in the chat. But yeah, if we don't have any questions, I just want to take a moment to thank Amit. Amit, thank you so much for sharing your experience with Unleash, for the presentation and everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Eva. Thanks, bro.
Awesome. All right, then. I will give you 10 minutes of your life back. This was supposed to be for 1 hour. We're finished in 15 minutes. 50 minutes. So yeah, have fun. Have a great rest of the day to all of you, and see you soon.
See you around. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.